The sun of planet Arkan rose weak and pale over the dry plains. Dust shimmered across the endless horizon as the morning wind moved through the silver grass. The mining colony stood at the center of the plain, surrounded by metal towers and solar panels that stretched toward the light. Humans had lived there for nearly 10 years, digging for crystals buried deep under the soil. Those crystals powered ships and cities across the human colonies. Life was not easy, but people were proud of what they had built on this lonely world. Inside the main control dome, Commander Mira watched the surface cameras on the screen. She was a calm and firm leader respected by everyone. Her eyes moved from one monitor to another, checking the work zones. The miners were already out in the east fields and the machines were humming again after a long night. Nothing seemed unusual, but the wind outside had a strange sound that morning, like a low whistle from far away. It carried through the valley, making the workers glance up from their tasks. Tom, one of the young survey engineers, paused near the edge of a ridge. His scanner in hand, he frowned as he looked up. The clouds were not moving right. They swirled slowly in circles, and the sunlight dimmed even though it was still early morning. He tapped his comm to call Mira. "Commander, I think the weather system is behaving strangely," Tom said. "The wind just changed direction 3 times in 1 minute." "Copy that," Mira replied. "Stay alert. We are checking the radar now." The air turned colder and the clouds darkened. Within minutes, the light of the twin suns vanished completely. Everyone outside felt the sudden chill. A deep vibration shook the ground, like something massive was moving under the crust. The miners stopped working and looked up as a thunderous roar rolled across the sky. It was not thunder. It was something alive. One of the watchtowers caught sight of the shapes first. 3 enormous figures broke through the clouds, moving faster than any aircraft. Their wings were wide as ships, covered in scales that gleamed white under the faint light. Long tails cut through the air like silver blades. They roared again and the entire colony froze in fear. Mira ran to the main console. "Get me a full scan," she ordered. "Identify those objects." The computer beeped and showed blurry images. "Unknown biological life forms detected," the operator said. "Size estimate 50 meters each. Heat signatures stable. No known species match." Tom stared at the sky from the ridge. His heart pounded as the creatures came closer. He could now see the details of their wings and their glowing red eyes. He whispered in disbelief, "Dragons!" They look like dragons. The first of the great beasts flew over the colony, its shadow covering the entire mining site. The sound of its wings cracked the air like thunder. The other 2 circled above the hills, releasing deep roars that echoed across the valley. Dust rose from the ground with every beat of their wings. The people ran for cover, shouting to one another. The defense towers turned their cannons upward, waiting for orders. Inside the dome, Mira watched in silence. Her mind was racing, but she stayed steady. "Hold fire," she said. "They are not attacking yet. We need to understand what they want." The dragons landed near the mining field with a quake that threw dust into the air. Their claws dug into the ground and their tails cut trenches through the soil. One of them raised its head high and released a roar so loud that the metal walls of the colony vibrated. It was a sound of anger and pain. The humans felt it deep in their bones. Tom had taken shelter behind a machine, but he could see their movements clearly. The dragons were searching the ground, sniffing the dirt and calling out in strange low tones. They seemed to be looking for something. One of them moved toward the canyon to the west where Tom's team had worked 2 days before. His stomach turned cold. That was the place where they had found the strange eggs. He whispered to himself, "Oh no." 2 days earlier, the survey team had found several large oval stones deep inside a cave near the crystal mines. They thought the stones were fossils or mineral formations. Tom had helped move them to the science dome for study. Now, as he watched the dragons digging near that same canyon, he realized the truth. Those stones were not stones at all. They were eggs. He opened his comm channel to Mira. "Commander, I think I know why they are here." "Speak quickly," she replied. 2 days ago, we found what we thought were fossil eggs near the crystal field. We brought them into the lab for research. I think they belong to these creatures." Mira went silent for a moment. The sound of another roar shook the dome. "Are you telling me we took their hatchlings?" "Yes," Tom said quietly. "I think that is exactly what happened." Outside, the dragons were moving closer to the colony walls. The defense team loaded the cannons, waiting for Mira's signal. The biggest dragon, taller than a tower, opened its mouth and released a jet of icy mist across the plain. The ground turned white, and frost climbed up the sides of the walls. People inside the colony could feel the temperature drop sharply. Mira knew they could not fight such creatures. The colony weapons were designed for small threats, not for something alive and strong enough to crush steel. She made a quick decision. "Power down all external weapons," she ordered. "Do not provoke them. I repeat, do not fire unless I give the order." The soldiers looked uneasy, but they obeyed. The colony lights dimmed as power shifted to the main shields. The dragons kept circling, their red eyes glowing like fire through the fog. Then one of them lowered its head and stared straight at the dome. It could sense something inside. It let out a deep rumble, and its breath fogged the glass of the dome itself. Tom could see the reflection of the dragon's eye through the window. The creature was not wild or mindless. There was intelligence in its gaze. It was searching, calling for something that had been taken. In the science dome, 2 scientists were still studying the eggs. They had kept them under warm lamps, thinking they were safe to handle. But now the readings on their monitors were spiking. The eggs were glowing faintly from within. Small shapes were moving inside. The hatchlings were still alive, and they were reacting to the sound of their parents outside. One of the scientists whispered, "They can hear them." At that same moment, the largest dragon released a roar of pure rage. It was so strong that it shattered the outer sensor towers and sent shockwaves across the ground. The colony alarms began to ring. Mira shouted to seal all outer gates. The defense system went active despite her orders. Auto turrets turned toward the dragons and opened fire. The blasts hit the nearest dragon in the chest. Blue energy lit up the sky. The creature staggered but did not fall. Instead, it screamed and unleashed a burst of freezing wind that swept over the weapons line. The entire first row of cannons froze solid. The people manning them fell back, terrified. Mira slammed the override switch to stop the firing. "Shut it down," she shouted. "All weapons offline now." "We are making it worse." The dragons backed away for a moment, watching. Their roars faded into low growls. Tom could see the steam rising from their mouths as they breathed heavily. They were not attacking to destroy. They were angry and desperate. They were searching for their young. Mira looked across the control room at Tom's face on the screen. "We have to give them back," she said. "If those are their young, it is the only way to stop this." Tom nodded. "Understood. I will go to the lab and prepare the eggs for transport." "Be careful," she said. "They are watching every move we make." As Tom ran toward the lab, the colony trembled again. The dragons were walking slowly toward the dome now, their claws leaving deep marks in the soil. The main glass dome reflected their white scales like mirrors. People inside held their breath. The dragons stopped only a few meters from the walls. Their eyes glowed brighter, filled with fire and sorrow. In the lab, Tom and the scientists worked quickly. They turned off the heat lamps and placed the glowing eggs inside a portable containment field. The hatchlings moved gently inside the shells, sensing the presence of their kind outside. Tom carried the container carefully, his hands shaking from both fear and hope. When he stepped out of the lab, the ground outside was shaking from the dragon's steps. Mira's voice came through his comm. "Tom, are you ready?" "Yes," he said. "I am heading to the main gate." "Do not run," she said. "Move slowly. They are watching you." Tom walked out of the airlock with the container in his arms. The wind whipped around him, carrying dust and frost. The dragons lowered their heads, watching him closely. Their nostrils flared as they smelled the air. One of them growled softly, a sound more curious than threatening. Tom stopped at the center of the open ground and raised the container slightly to show them. The dragons stepped closer, their wings folding against their sides, their red eyes fixed on the glowing shapes inside. Tom felt his fear fading a little. These creatures were not monsters. They were parents who had lost their children. As the wind blew across the plain, silence fell over the colony. Even the machines stopped humming. Everyone watched from the safety of the domes as man and dragon faced each other in the cold light of the suns. Mira whispered from the control room, "Hold your ground, Tom, they are listening." The dragons began to move again, slower this time, their anger turning into something else. The largest one lowered its head almost to the ground, its golden eyes meeting. The morning after the white storm passed, silence hung over the colony. The air was still cold and the ground was covered with thin frost where the dragons had stood. The people of Arkan had survived, but the fear still lived in their hearts. Machines were broken, Towers were bent and the mining fields were filled with cracks. Yet the strangest thing was that the dragons had not destroyed everything. They had left after Tom came out with the eggs, but they did not take them. They had only looked, growled once, and flown away toward the northern mountains. It felt like a warning more than mercy. Inside the main dome, Commander Mira sat at the central table with her officers. Holograms of damaged structures floated above them. Everyone looked tired, but no one wanted to rest. They all knew the dragons could return at any time. Mira looked at her officers. We need to understand what we are dealing with. They are not just animals. They acted with reason. They stopped when they saw Tom holding the eggs. An engineer spoke, his voice shaky. Maybe they realized we were not hurting them. Another added. Or maybe they are waiting for something. They could be watching us right now. Mira turned to Tom, who sat quietly with a bandage on his arm. He had been outside longer than anyone, and his clothes still carried the smell of frost. Tom, you were closest to them. What did you feel when they looked at you? Tom thought for a moment before answering. It was strange. At first I thought they would kill me. But when I showed them the eggs, they stopped. It was like they understood. They were angry but not mindless. I think they wanted to see if their young were alive. Mira nodded slowly. Then they are intelligent. That means this is not only a survival problem. It is a communication problem. The scientists agreed. One of them, Dr. Kalin, spoke carefully. The eggs are unlike anything we have seen. Their structure is crystalline, almost like living glass. They react to temperature and sound. When the dragons roared, the shells began to glow stronger. That means there is some form of connection between parent and child. Mira looked at him sharply. You mean they can sense each other from a distance? Yes, Dr. Kalin said. The energy patterns suggest a kind of resonance, almost like a heartbeat shared through the air. When they flew away, the glow faded. They are connected by more than just biology. Mira folded her arms. So they know where their hatchlings are? That is likely, Kalin said. If they felt the eggs being moved, that might be what brought them here. Tom leaned forward. Then we have to return them. If we keep the hatchlings here, they will come back again. The room went silent. Everyone knew Tom was right. But the idea of walking into the northern mountains where the dragons lived was terrifying. No one wanted to go near them again. Before Mira could respond, an alarm sounded from the control station. The guard at the console shouted, Commander, motion detected beyond the East Ridge. 3 large heat signatures, same as before. Mira stood at once. Everyone to your stations. Tom, stay here. The screens came alive with images from the outer cameras. The dragons were flying again, moving fast toward the colony. Their white bodies glowed under the bright suns, leaving trails of mist behind them. The people froze in fear. They had come back sooner than anyone expected. Shields up, Mira ordered. No weapons. Just shields. The colony shimmered under a thin blue field as energy shields activated. The dragons slowed as they neared the dome. They did not attack. Instead, they circled high above, calling out in long cries that echoed across the valley. It sounded less like anger and more like grief. Tom stood near the window staring up at them. His chest tightened with guilt. He thought of the eggs resting in the lab under warm light. He could not stand the sound of those cries anymore. Commander, he said, I have to talk to them. Mira looked at him as if he had lost his mind. Talk to them? You think they will understand you? I think they already do, Tom said. When I showed them the eggs, they stopped. If they wanted to destroy us, they could have done it already. Mira hesitated. If you go out there, you might not come back. Tom nodded. Then I will go anyway. They are looking for their young. They have a reason. Mira stared at him for a moment, then sighed. All right, you go. But take the translator drone with you. Maybe it will record something useful. Tom put on his insulated suit and carried the small hover drone on his shoulder. In his hands, he held one of the eggs, carefully sealed in a protective case. The hatchling inside moved faintly, glowing a soft blue. The airlock opened and he stepped outside. The wind blew hard across the plain as Tom walked out from the safety of the colony. The dragons saw him and lowered their flight. The largest one, the same that had led the first attack, landed with a quake that shook the earth. The other 2 hovered above, watching closely. Tom stood his ground. The drone hovered beside him, blinking as it recorded everything. He held up the egg so the dragon could see. The great beast bent its neck, its red eyes narrowing as it looked closer. The air shimmered from its breath. Tom spoke loudly, hoping his voice would carry. We did not mean to hurt your young. We found them and thought they were fossils. We kept them safe. They are alive." The dragon's nostrils flared as it sniffed the air around the egg. It made a low rumbling sound that felt like thunder rolling through the ground. Then it let out a long breath that turned the dust into frost. The sound it made next was softer, almost sad. Inside the dome, Mira and her crew watched the scene unfold. "He is communicating," she whispered. "Look at its posture. It is not aggressive." The dragon slowly raised its head and released another low call toward the mountains. A faint echo came back from the distance. Tom realized the others in its group were answering. They were speaking across the air. Then something unexpected happened. The dragon looked directly at Tom and touched the ground gently with one claw. The motion seemed deliberate, as if it was drawing something in the dirt. Tom stepped closer and saw lines forming a shape. It looked like a circle with two smaller ones inside it. Dr. Kalen's voice came through the comm from inside the dome. "That is the same pattern we saw on the eggshells. It is their symbol for family," Tom nodded. "I think they are asking for the others." He turned and pointed toward the colony dome. The dragon followed his gesture and let out a deep rumble that vibrated through his bones. The drone translated the sound frequencies. On the screen inside, Kalen shouted, "It is repeating one pattern over and over. It is saying, 'Bring them.'" Mira made her decision. "Open the gate. Give him the rest of the eggs." Two guards carried out the containment case that held the remaining eggs. They handed it carefully to Tom, who placed it on the ground near the dragon. The creature sniffed it and made a soft sound, almost like a purr. Its eyes glowed brighter. Then it looked up at the sky and called again. The sound carried across the entire valley. From the distance, the echo came again, stronger this time. The mountains trembled. Everyone turned their eyes toward the horizon as another group of shapes appeared through the clouds. More dragons, smaller and fewer in number but shining just as white, were coming. They landed near the first three, forming a ring around the open field. Together they stood silent, their eyes glowing like embers in the snow. Then they began to breathe slowly, releasing mist into the air that surrounded the eggs. The mist glittered with tiny sparks like snow mixed with light. The eggs responded by glowing brighter. The shells began to crack gently one by one. The hatchlings were waking. Tom stepped back as the first shell broke open. A small white snout appeared, followed by tiny wings. The newborn dragon blinked its silver eyes and let out a small chirp that echoed softly in the cold air. The parent dragon lowered its head, making a deep rumble of affection. The other hatchlings began to break free, their cries filling the plain like soft music. Inside the dome, the humans watched in silence. Some smiled, others cried. No one could believe what they were seeing. The dragons were not monsters. They were family, and they were showing love in a way no one expected. Tom felt warmth in his chest. He turned to the nearest dragon and spoke softly. "They are yours. We never meant harm." The dragon looked at him, eyes bright with reflected sunlight. It released a single puff of mist that touched his chest like a breath of wind. It was a sign of peace. The translator drone registered a single tone and repeated it in words. "Grateful." The sound of the word stunned everyone in the control room. Mira whispered. It spoke. Dr. Kalen checked the data. It was not random. The tone matched human speech frequency. It was an attempt to communicate. Tom smiled faintly. "Maybe they understand more than we think." The dragons gathered their hatchlings carefully, using their claws with surprising gentleness. They formed a protective circle around the small ones, shielding them from the wind. The air grew warmer as the mist faded. The parents turned their gaze toward Tom and Mira's dome once more. Then, with powerful beats of their wings, they lifted into the air, carrying their young with them. The storm that had haunted the colony finally broke apart completely. The sky cleared, leaving bright sunlight across the frozen ground. Mira watched from inside as they disappeared toward the mountains. She spoke quietly. "We met something older than us, and we survived because we showed care." Tom looked up, following the white shapes until they vanished. He felt small yet proud. The next few days passed in strange silence. The sky over Archon stayed clear, and the mining colony looked calm again. But the people could not forget what they had seen. Every time the wind howled across the plains, they thought it might be the sound of wings returning. Commander Mira ordered daily patrols and strict communication watch. The engineers repaired the damaged towers, and the scientists continued studying every recording from the translator drone. Everyone hoped the dragons were gone for good, but hope is a fragile thing. Tom could not rest. He spent long hours in the observation dome, watching the northern mountains where the dragons had flown. He felt a connection to them, not of friendship but of understanding. He had seen intelligence in their eyes and care in their actions, yet he also knew that humans had crossed a line by taking their eggs. If the dragons decided that humans were a danger to their kind, they might return in force. Dr. Kalin entered the room holding a small data tablet. "Tom, you should get some sleep," he said. "You have been here since morning." Tom shook his head. "I can't stop thinking about them. We gave the hatchlings back, but something tells me it is not over." Kalin sighed. "The data from the translator drone is still being analyzed. The dragon's vocal patterns contain complex frequency shifts. It may take weeks to understand their full meaning. But I agree with you. This is not over." Before Tom could answer, the ground shook slightly. The coffee mug beside him rattled. Both men looked at each other. "Earthquake?" Kalin asked. Tom looked at the seismograph screen. "No, something is flying again." Outside, the horizon flickered with light. The alarm sirens activated across the colony. Mira's voice came through the speakers. "All personnel, code red. Unidentified movement approaching from the north. Get to your stations." Tom ran to the control dome with Kalin right behind him. When they arrived, the main screen showed a live feed from the sky cameras. 4 massive shapes were descending fast. The glow of their white wings reflected off the dust. These were not the same 3 dragons as before. They were larger and older, and they carried a different energy in their flight. Their scales looked cracked with silver lines as if filled with lightning. Mira stood firm at the command center. "These are new ones. They look different," she said. "Prepare shields, but do not engage unless they attack." The dragons landed with thunderous impact near the mining field. Their roars shook the air. The first roar was so strong that the glass panels of the dome trembled. The workers hid under the metal walkways. The dragon's eyes burned brighter than fire. They were not calm like the ones before. They were angry and grieving. It became clear that these were not the parents of the returned hatchlings, but warriors of their kind. Dr. Kalin looked pale. They must have come after hearing what happened. Perhaps they believed their young were harmed. Tom clenched his fists. "We need to show them the truth again before this turns into a fight." But before anyone could act, the biggest dragon released a beam of icy energy toward the ground. The blast froze an entire line of mining machines. Another dragon struck with its claws, tearing through the metal field towers. The humans scrambled for safety. The defense system, still on standby, detected active damage and triggered automatic fire. Pulse cannons on the walls began firing bright blue bursts toward the dragons. Mira shouted, "Shut it down. Stop firing." But the auto-defense system had already locked onto the targets. The beams struck one of the dragons across the wing. The creature screamed in rage and retaliated. It flapped its wings once, sending a wave of frost and wind that knocked over an entire row of defense turrets. The shockwave shattered windows and threw men to the ground. Tom grabbed the emergency comm. "Commander, we have to stop the shooting or they will destroy the entire colony." Mira slammed her hand on the manual override. "Cut all power to external weapons." The hum of the cannons faded, but the damage was already done. The dragons were furious. The lead dragon roared again, releasing another freezing blast toward the dome. The outer shields flickered and held for a moment but cracked like glass under the next strike. Sparks flew across the control room. Red lights flashed as the system warned of shield failure. Mira shouted, "All non-essential crew to the shelters. Engineers, reroute power to the main dome." Tom looked at the radar screen. The dragons were moving closer in formation, circling the dome like predators closing in. The sound of their wings filled the air with thunder. One of them landed directly on top of a storage building, crushing it under its weight. Metal screamed and collapsed. The shock threw Tom and Kalin off their feet. When Tom looked up, he saw through the cracked glass window the giant face of a dragon staring down at them. Its eye was as big as a human chest, glowing red and fierce. It released a low growl that shook the air inside the dome. Then it pulled back and struck the ground with its claws, creating a deep crater. Mira grabbed the comm again. "We need to send a signal to the orbiting ship. We cannot hold them off if this continues." A soldier replied, "The antenna is damaged, Commander. We lost the high-frequency link." Tom stood up. "I can fix it. I know the route. You will be killed out there, Mira said. I will take a transport drone, Tom replied. It moves fast enough to dodge their attacks. Mira hesitated, then nodded. Go, take Kalen with you. You will need help. They ran toward the hangar as the ground trembled again. The sky outside was filled with ice particles glowing white from the dragon's breaths. The air temperature dropped fast. When they reached the hangar, they found the small hover transport ready. Tom jumped into the pilot seat while Kalen took the co-pilot position. The engines roared to life, and the craft lifted off just as a dragon's tail smashed into the ground nearby, sending shards of ice flying. The transport shot forward at full speed, weaving between collapsing towers. The dragons noticed the movement and turned their attention toward the small craft. One of them opened its mouth and fired a stream of frost. The beam hit the ground just behind them, covering it in thick ice. The transport barely escaped. Tom pushed the engines harder. Hang on, he said. We are almost at the antenna tower. The tower stood on a ridge about 1 kilometer away. As they approached, another dragon swooped down in front of them, blocking their path. Its body glowed with light from within. It spread its wings and released a deafening roar that froze the air itself. The sound made the craft shake violently. Kalen gripped his seat. We cannot pass it. Tom's eyes narrowed. Then we go under it. He dropped the transport low, flying just above the rocky ground. The dragon tried to strike but missed by a few meters. The shockwave from its claws flipped the craft upside down, but Tom managed to stabilize it. They skimmed through the valley and reached the base of the tower. Tom landed hard, jumped out, and ran toward the main control panel. Kalen followed, covering him from falling debris. The wind howled with cold, and the sound of wings thundered above them. Tom worked fast, connecting power cables and rebooting the transmitter. Sparks flew from the console as he bypassed the frozen circuits. Signal restored, Kalen shouted. We can send the distress call now. Tom activated the beacon and transmitted Mira's emergency code. This is Archon Colony. Under attack by unknown dragon-type entities. Require immediate evacuation or backup. A faint reply came through static. Message received. Support ship en route. Estimated arrival 4 hours. 4 hours felt like a lifetime in the middle of such chaos. Tom looked up and saw a dragon landing nearby, its claws digging into the rocks. Its eyes locked on him. The wind from its wings nearly threw him off balance. He ducked behind the console. Kalen shouted, "Run!" The dragon reared back and unleashed a burst of icy mist that turned the ridge white. The cold hit Tom's skin through his suit. He grabbed a flare gun from his belt and fired it toward the dragon's face. The bright light startled the creature for a moment. It blinked and stepped back, confused by the sudden glare. Tom used that moment to run back to the craft with Kalen. As they lifted off, the dragon roared again but did not follow. Instead, it turned its head toward the mountains and released a long cry. From the far distance, faint echoes answered. Tom felt a chill deeper than cold. They are calling reinforcements. They raced back toward the colony as the sky darkened once more. The dragons had stopped their attack but remained close, circling above like guardians of the storm. The ground below was covered in frost and wreckage. Mira stood outside the damaged dome, watching the sky with grim eyes. When Tom and Kalen landed, Mira met them. We got the message through, Tom said. Help is coming, but it will take time. Mira nodded. Good, because we may not have much of it. Look. She pointed toward the horizon. A strange glow was spreading across the mountains, a pale light that flickered like fire but moved like liquid. It was not the sun. It was the reflection of hundreds of wings. Tom's breath caught. More are coming. Mira looked at him with steady eyes. Then we must make them see we are not enemies. If we fight, we lose. But if they attack again before we prove it, we may not survive to explain. Tom looked at the sky filled with white light and felt both fear and awe. The dragons were not a myth or a nightmare. They were real and powerful, protectors of something sacred that humans had disturbed. He knew that the next hours would decide the fate of every. The colony was half broken, covered in smoke and fire. The night sky glowed red from the flames that had spread through the outer buildings. The air was thick with dust and fear. The people who had survived hid inside the underground shelters, holding their breath every time the ground trembled under the steps of the dragons. Tom ran through the narrow tunnels of the base, holding a small light in his hand. His clothes were burned at the edges and his face was covered in dirt. He had seen many storms before, but nothing like this. The dragons had come in anger, and Every step they took carried more power than any weapon known to man. Commander Mira was waiting near the entrance to the research dome. Her uniform was torn, her right arm wrapped in a bandage, but her eyes were steady. When Tom arrived, she asked in a firm voice, "Did you get the data from the power core?" Tom nodded. "Yes, but the main system is failing. The generators will stop in 2 hours. After that, everything goes dark." Mira looked out through the crack in the wall. A soft white glow moved outside, followed by a low growl that shook the ground. One of the albino dragons passed by, its wings half-folded, searching. Its scales reflected the firelight like polished ice. "They are not leaving," Mira said quietly. "They want something. They are not here to destroy for no reason." Tom's mind was racing. He remembered the eggs in the lab, the strange warmth, the faint heartbeat sounds they had picked up earlier. Then he looked toward the dome, and a sudden thought hit him like lightning. "Mira," he said, breathing fast. "The hatchlings, the ones we found in the canyon. They are still in the lab. They could be the reason these dragons came." Mira turned to him sharply. "You think those eggs were alive?" "Yes," Tom replied. "I think we took their young without knowing it. They must have followed the energy signature of the incubators. That's why they came straight here." Mira's jaw tightened. "Then we bring them back before everyone dies." The two of them moved through the damaged hallways. Every step was a risk. The walls were cracked, cables hung loose, and the floor was littered with metal shards. Outside, the dragons continued their slow march, breathing smoke through their nostrils. When they reached the main corridor leading to the dome, a sudden burst of cold air rushed through. The door had been ripped open. The temperature dropped sharply, and a thin layer of frost covered the ground. The dragon with the silver eyes had passed through this way. Tom and Mira crouched low, moving quietly. They could hear the deep breathing of the creature somewhere nearby. Its massive tail brushed against the wall, leaving deep cracks. Every sound felt louder than thunder. Inside the research dome, the light was dim but still working. The air was strangely calm. Tom moved to the glass chamber at the center. Inside, hid under the warm glow of the incubator lights, were 3 small creatures. The hatchlings were white as snow, their scales soft and shiny. They were curled together, breathing softly, their tiny wings twitching in their sleep. They looked peaceful, unaware of the chaos outside. Tom stood frozen for a moment, amazed. "They are alive," he whispered. Mira's eyes softened as she watched them. "So small. They look harmless." "They are the key," Tom said. "Their parents are looking for them." Before they could act, the wall behind them shook violently. A giant claw tore through the metal, followed by a loud roar. The dome's glass cracked and dust filled the air. The silver-eyed dragon forced its head through the opening, its eyes blazing red with rage. Tom shielded the hatchlings instinctively. Mira fired a flare launcher at the creature, not to harm it but to distract it. The bright light burst near its face, and the dragon pulled back with a loud hiss. "Go!" Mira shouted. "Take the hatchlings! Get them out now!" Tom didn't argue. He grabbed a protective case from the shelf, gently placed the hatchlings inside, and sealed it. They made small chirping sounds but did not struggle. He ran toward the exit while Mira covered him. The dragon struck again, smashing through the doorway. Its massive head blocked the path. Tom stopped, staring at its glowing eyes. He raised the case slowly to show what he was holding. The dragon froze. The red glow in its eyes dimmed. It tilted its head slightly and sniffed the air. A deep rumble came from its chest, not of anger, but of recognition. Tom's hands trembled, but he held his ground. "They are safe," he said softly. "Your young are safe." The dragon lowered its head, pressing its snout against the glass of the case. The hatchlings woke up, chirping happily. One of them reached out its tiny claw and touched the glass. The mother dragon made a sound that was almost like a sigh. Mira slowly lowered her weapon. The tension in the air faded. Tom opened the case and stepped back. The hatchlings climbed out clumsily and walked toward the giant creature. The dragon gently picked them up with her claws and placed them on her neck. The little ones curled under her scales, safe and warm. The great dragon let out a long, deep roar that echoed through the mountains. It was not a cry of rage, but a call. In the distance, 2 more dragons answered. The sky rumbled as they returned, landing nearby. The silver-eyed dragon stepped back from the ruins, holding her young close. She looked down at Tom and Mira, her eyes calm. For a moment, everything was silent. Then she bowed her head slightly, as if showing respect. Mira took a step forward and said, "We never meant to hurt them. We did not know they were alive." The dragon blinked slowly, watching her. Then she spread her wings wide, sending a gust of wind that blew the smoke away. The other dragons landed beside her, and the colony fell silent again. Tom felt a deep mix of relief and awe. These were not mindless beasts. They had come out of love and fear, not hate. They had shown that even creatures of such power could care deeply for their own. Mira turned to Tom. "We have to tell everyone what happened here. The dragons are not our enemies." Tom nodded. "Yes, humanity must learn to see beyond fear." Outside, the dragons formed a circle around their young. They spoke in low rumbles, a language of sound and vibration. The ground trembled slightly with each tone. It felt ancient, something that had existed long before humans learned to speak. The night was quiet again. The fires slowly died out, leaving behind only glowing embers. The cold wind from the mountains began to wash over the land, clearing the smoke. Tom watched the dragons from a distance. He could see the hatchlings resting peacefully under their mother's wings. The sight filled him with a strange sense of hope. If such powerful beings could show mercy, then maybe there was a chance for peace between their kinds. Mira sat beside him on a broken wall. "They will leave soon," she said. "They got what they came for." Tom nodded. "And maybe they will remember us as the ones who gave their young back." The largest dragon raised her head and looked toward the stars. Her wings stretched wide, glowing under the moonlight. With a single powerful move, she lifted into the air. The other dragons followed, flying high above the colony. The hatchlings clung tightly as they disappeared into the clouds. The humans stood outside their shelters, watching in silence. No one spoke. The sound of the wings faded slowly, replaced by the whisper of the wind. Tom took a deep breath and closed his eyes. For the first time since the attack began, the air felt calm. The war that almost happened had ended with an act of understanding. Mira placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did well," she said. "We did what was right," Tom replied. "And that is what matters." Above them, the night sky cleared, showing a bright field of stars. Somewhere among them, other worlds waited, each with their own creatures and their own truths. But tonight, on the planet Archon, humanity had taken a step forward, not through strength but through compassion. And as the last sound of dragon wings faded into the sky, a quiet promise filled the hearts of the survivors. That humans could learn, change, and stand beside even the mightiest beings of the galaxy. The morning sun rose over the mining colony of Archon, painting the plains in soft gold light. The frost on the ground had melted, leaving behind puddles of clear water that reflected the sky. The colony looked quiet and peaceful now. But the memory of the dragon's arrival still weighed on everyone's minds. Broken towers, smashed equipment, and scorched land reminded the humans that the creatures they had met were unlike anything they had ever faced. Commander Mira walked through the main hall of the dome, her steps slow but steady. She inspected the repairs being made to the walls and the power conduits. Engineers worked with urgency, their hands steady despite the fear that had gripped them for days. Everyone understood that the dragons had come for a reason, and everyone knew that human actions could no longer be careless. Tom followed her, carrying the small recording device from the translator drone. The data stored within it contained every sound, every vibration, and every tone from the dragons. He hoped that by studying it, they could understand more about the creature's intelligence and emotions. "They are incredible," Tom said, glancing at the device. "Not just powerful, but smart. They know how to respond to reason, and they are caring toward their young." Mira nodded. "Yes, but we need more than admiration. We need understanding. If these dragons come again, we must know how to communicate properly." We cannot rely on luck. Outside, the plains were calm. The wind moved softly through the silver grass, and distant mountains rose like silent guardians. A shadow passed over the colony. Everyone stopped and looked upward. 3 enormous white dragons were gliding in the sky, far enough not to strike but close enough to watch. Their scales glimmered in the morning sun, and the hatchlings rested along the backs of the adults. The sight was breathtaking. "They are watching us," Mira said softly. "And judging what we did." Tom felt a mix of fear and awe. "They are not angry anymore," he said. "They are cautious but calm." The dragons circled slowly and then landed on a nearby hill, their massive bodies dwarfing the tallest towers. The largest dragon stepped forward, her head held high, the hatchlings peeking from under her protective wings. Her eyes met Tom's, and she gave a small, deliberate rumble. The translator drone had picked up the sound, and now Tom repeated it softly. Grateful, a shiver ran down his spine. It was not just a word. It was a message, a recognition of trust. The dragon had acknowledged that humans had acted correctly, and in turn, humans had earned a chance to coexist with a being far older and wiser than themselves. Mira stepped closer to Tom. "We must return the trust. That is our responsibility." They decided to leave the damaged sections of the colony behind and approach the dragons carefully. Every step was deliberate. Mira raised her hand slightly as a gesture of peace. Tom held the drone high, letting it hover between them and the dragons. The dragon lowered her head slightly, allowing the hatchlings to peek at the humans. One of the young dragons chirped, a soft, playful sound. The mother's eyes glowed faintly, showing relief that her children were safe and that the humans had done no harm. Tom knelt slowly, keeping his hands visible. "We will protect your young," he said. "We will not harm them again. We want to learn not to fight." The dragon moved closer, each step careful, her claws leaving deep marks in the soft ground. She sniffed the air near Tom, then near Mira. Her breath was cold but not hostile. Then she lowered her head to the ground in a gesture that resembled a bow. Mira looked at Tom, astonished. "It is bowing. It is showing respect," Tom nodded, "and perhaps trust." The hatchlings climbed slowly to the ground, exploring the grass around the humans. They chirped softly, playful and curious. One small dragon approached Tom and nudged his leg with a tiny snout. Tom bent down and touched its soft scales carefully. The hatchling did not flinch. Mira reached out to the others, and soon, the humans and dragons shared a quiet moment of understanding. From the hilltop, the 2 other adult dragons observed silently. Their eyes scanned the colony, then returned to the humans and the hatchlings. They lowered their heads slightly, signaling approval. The bond between human and dragon was fragile but real. Commander Mira knew that this was not just a personal victory. It was a sign of what humanity could achieve with care, understanding, and respect. She turned to Tom. "We must document this. The rest of humanity needs to know that power is not always the answer. Compassion is," Tom smiled. "Yes, and maybe someday we can learn to speak their language." The dragons spread their wings slightly, feeling the wind. The largest dragon gave a soft rumble that echoed like rolling thunder across the plains. Tom and Mira felt it in their chest. It was a sound of reassurance and peace. The humans and dragons spent the next hours together. Mira showed the dragons the repaired domes and the human equipment, demonstrating that their tools were no longer a threat. The dragons observed with curiosity, sniffing the air and touching structures with their claws gently. Every movement was careful and deliberate, as if they were teaching humans a lesson in observation and respect. The hatchlings ran and flew short distances, practicing their wings. Tom watched them, amazed at their speed and grace. Their small bodies glowed faintly under the sunlight, a sign of health and vitality. The dragons allowed the young to play freely, showing patience and care. Mira approached the largest dragon again. "If we work together," she said, "we can prevent future conflict. Your kind and ours can coexist if we respect each other's lives." The dragon's eyes softened. She nudged Mira's hand lightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. The translator drone picked up a low hum, and Tom repeated it softly. Understood. The bond formed that day was not just for survival. It was a connection of trust, respect, and hope. Humanity had faced creatures stronger, faster, and older than themselves. And instead of reacting with fear or violence, they had chosen care. In return, the dragons had recognized them not as enemies, but as allies worthy of trust. By midday, the dragons lifted into the sky, carrying the hatchlings. The humans watched in silence. The adults circled once above the colony, then turned toward the mountains. They paused for a moment, wings spread wide in a display of strength and grace. It was a farewell, but also a promise. Tom felt a mixture of relief and awe. "They will remember us," he said. "And we will remember them," Mira nodded. "And one day perhaps we will meet again. Not in fear, but in friendship." The dragons soared higher, their wings cutting through the clouds. The hatchlings clung closely, chirping softly. The sunlight reflected on their scales, making them shine like crystals. The humans felt small in comparison, yet proud that they had acted wisely. As the dragons disappeared into the distance, the colony began to recover. People emerged from the shelters, amazed at the silence and peace that had returned. They started repairing the structures, clearing debris, and restoring the mining fields. Conversations were quiet at first, then filled with excitement and wonder. The children of the colony ran across the plains, pretending to be dragons, spreading their arms like wings. Their laughter was pure and light, a reminder that life could continue even after fear and destruction. Tom and Mira stood together, watching the plains. "We have learned something important," Mira said. "Strength is not always the answer. Wisdom and care can overcome even the greatest dangers." Tom smiled. "And maybe someday humans and dragons will be allies, guardians of this world together." The sun began to set over the mountains, casting a golden glow over the colony. The silver grass shimmered and the air felt clean and fresh. The scars of the battle were still visible, but they were a reminder of what had been achieved. Humanity had faced the impossible and had survived, not because of weapons, but because of empathy and understanding. And somewhere far above, the albino dragons flew toward their home in the northern mountains, their young safe and resting. The bond they had formed with humans was fragile but real. They had seen the hearts of the people of Archon, and they had chosen to trust them. The colony would rebuild stronger and wiser. And humanity would remember that day as the moment when courage, compassion, and intelligence proved greater than fear. The albino dragons had come in anger, searching for their young, but in the end, they had found something else: respect, trust, and a shared hope for the future. As night fell, the stars shone bright over Archon. Tom looked up at them and whispered softly, "This is only the beginning." Mira placed her hand on his shoulder. "Yes, and the beginning is always the most important part." The colony rested, the dragons rested, and the world felt larger, filled with life, promise, and understanding. Humanity had faced the impossible and emerged wiser, ready to meet the challenges of the stars with open hearts. The albino dragons had returned their hatchlings safely. Humanity had shown that it could be more than just a force. It could be a partner. And in the quiet of that night, trust had been born between two species, stronger than any weapon, brighter than any fire, and lasting longer than fear.